Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. We live, ladies and gentlemen. This is Scholars 20 for 20. This is number 14. I got my man Chuck Morgan in the building. We're going
Hey,
to talk about the Sumerians today. A lot of people talking about they know about Sumerian history, whether they black, whether they Africans. There's a lot of information out there as far as a black community that we've put out. So this brother has studied the language. He has talked to Assyriologists. He's dealt with the scholars, and he's trying to build information up on what the sources actually say. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you first and foremost my brother Chuck Morgan. How you doing today, brother?
how you doing, Brother Garfield? How you feel?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
All is well. All is well. Sunshine. Well, actually, it's cloudy right now, but everything is good. Feeling great.
He said cloudy. It's snowing in New York, so I'm inside all day. But
I
what I'm gonna
understand.
do today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm backing off. I'm not asking my brother questions. I want a presentation that's gonna make us be aware of what's been going on in our community as far as the information, and we're gonna do what we're supposed to do, and we're gonna acknowledge greatness. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my brother, Chuck Morgan. It's all yours, brother.
All right. Thank you, Brother Garfield. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all those that are tuned in right now. All I'm doing here is I wanted to share some of the research that I was able to accumulate over pretty much the last year. It's a topic that I've been intimately involved in, going all the way back to childhood. I think my first introduction into the Sumerians and/or cuneiform language goes back to, ironically, to an episode of Gilligan's Island, and when the professor of some tablets rolled up on the beach, and Gilligan found them, and the professor had the task of deciphering them, and ultimately he was reading them backwards, and it was a funny story, but that kind of sparked my interest into the whole idea of it. And over the years, I had to come across various publications, Sitchin and others, who put a spin on it, and it just caused me to want to investigate it even further. So all I'm doing here is just kind of sharing the various sources that I was able to catch, and with the gratitude to various Assyriologists, teachers of the Sumerian language. They gave me certain publications or directions on where I can access them and read them and get further clarity and come up with my own conclusions, which is part of what I would like to do here, is share with you, and you make your decision. There may be those who agree or disagree. This is not the issue. I'm just presenting certain things that I was able to uncover. This is not saying that there's no end to it, because this is a constant where you're always learning, and we grow and as we go. So I'm going to begin. As you see here, the Sumerians, were they black? Well, we'll go into that. So here, in an area of southern Iraq, existed one of the world's most enigmatic societies, the Sumerians. They were non-Semitic, non-Indo-European, and a non-African people who flourished in southern Mesopotamia from the beginning of the 4th to the end of the 3rd millennium BCE. Their origins was a subject of very intense debate, which began more than a century ago. Many authors tried to solve the Sumerian problem with the help of the available archaeological, linguistic, and even osteological data, but without any universally accepted conclusions. During this long stretch of time, the Sumerians, whose racial and linguistic affiliations are still unclassifiable, they represented the dominant cultural group of the entire Near East, and their cultural dominance manifested itself in 3 directions. It was the Sumerians who developed and probably invented the cuneiform system of writing, which was adopted by nearly all the peoples of the Near East, and without which the cultural progress of Western Asia would have been largely impossible. Also, the Sumerians developed religious and spiritual concepts together with a remarkably well integrated pantheon, which influenced profoundly all the peoples of Near East, including the Hebrews and the Greeks. The Sumerians produced a vast and highly developed literature, largely poetic in character, consisting of epics and myths, hymns and lamentations, proverbs, and words of wisdom. These compositions are inscribed in cuneiform script on clay tablets, which date largely from approximately 2000 BC. And you can refer to Samuel Kramer's Sumerian Mythology, a study of spiritual and literary achievement in the 3rd millennium BC. So the Sumerians settled in an area known as Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers about 5,000 years ago. They produced many fundamental changes to the way in which human societies develop. One of the first people to develop a sophisticated written language, the Sumerians also produced art, music, the literature, as well as created some of the first professional soldiers the world had ever seen. But for all that we know about the Sumerians, one central mystery remains. We have no idea where the Sumerians came from when they suddenly arrived in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. Many people have put forward answers ranging from the plausible to the esoteric to the literally out of this world, but none provides a complete or final answer. And as you can see, what I try to do is have the sources here, so anyone that wants to write them down, or you can come back after the video is over and check it and or recheck it. So by going to the different scholars and experts on this, I'm going to be just going down a list and showing you some of their works, the results of what they've been able to share with the world in their years of study in the particular fields. So in Ancient Mesopotamia, Life in the Cradle of Civilization, course guidebook, the study of Mesopotamian history began relatively recently with the decipherment of their writing system about 170 years ago. This was accompanied by a flurry of archaeological excavations in Iran, in Iraq, Iran, and Syria, work that has continued ever since. The excavations reveal cities of great sophistication that thrived in an era long before the Greeks, Romans, and Israelites. And you can refer to this book, which I highly recommend. It's a very, very insightful publication. Now, this is early Mesopotamian city-states. I kind of put this out here so people can get a kind of a picture. And as you can see here, you have Ki-Nir, you have Enlil, Kish, Orem, and my favorite here is Lagash. And you have here, this should also help you along, give you southern Iraq here. We have Eridu, or all the way up, and you have the Euphrates, Tigris, even the Zagros Mountains, and the Gutians, who are people we're going to deal with much later. But just wanted to give you a kind of an idea of where the location stems on maps in the ancient world. All right. So, Ki-Nir, Eme Ki-Ngira. The English word Sumerian is derived from the Akkadian term Shumeru, the northern land, or Shumeru. The Sumerians called it Ki-Nir, literally place, land of the civilized lords, according to Halloran. Sumerian was called Ki-Ngira. Ame Ki-Ngira. Tongue of Ki-Nir, Sumer, or Eminir in Sumerian proper, and Lasan Shumeru, tongue of Shumeru in Akkadian. You can refer to the Sumerian lexicon of Alan Halloran, and Edzard's Sumerian grammar book. Both books I highly recommend, both of which I had studied, and this is one of my favorites. Even though it's like $100, but it's one of my favorite publications that I recommended. So, as I mentioned earlier about the Sumerian problem, the long-running controversy of who the ancient Sumerians were and where they came from is an old argument in Assyriology, and it's the Sumerian problem, which revolves around that, and it's a very emotional debate issue among scholars regarding the ethnic makeup of the people in southern Mesopotamia about the fourth millennium BC. So in a book called The Lives of Sumerian Sculpture, The Archaeology of the Early Dynastic Temple by Jean Evans, she writes, visual evidence of the Sumerians was almost completely unknown until 1877, when the site of Tello began to yield numerous statues of Gudea, the ruler of Lagash. Shortly thereafter, the Sumerians were featured in an ethnographic exhibition celebrating the progress of human labor at the 1889 Universal Exposition in Paris. Now, John Halloran, in his blog page, he deals with questions and answers. So on the topic of who the Sumerians were, he wrote the following. He said, I believe that the Proto-Sumerian language predates the Proto-Indo-European language. Were they blonde people with Nordic white skin? Probably not. They described themselves as blackheaded people. And the book by Calvely Schwarza et al., The History and Geography of Human Genes, suggests their modern descendants are the people of Kuwait. Now, this is equal to Samuel Kramer's conclusions that the Sumerians at some remote period arrived in the marsh area from Iran. Yeah, you can look at Imerkar and the Lord of Artatab, a Sumerian epic tale of Iraq and Iran. So Kramer put his hypothesis in that in 1952. Now, Kramer's hypothesis may now have some validity because of the following article of the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and this is in 2011. And it goes like this. A prevalent Middle Eastern ancestry of the modern populations of the marsh of southern Iraq implies that if the marsh Arabs are descendants of the ancient Sumerians, also the Sumerians were most likely indigenous and not of Indian or South Asian ancestry. The Mesopotamian civilization originated around the 4th millennium BC in the low course of the Tigris-Euphrates rivers. This alluvial territory, which emerged progressively by soil sediments, attracted different populations from the northern and eastern mountains. But whereas traces of their culture and present in the territory, as documented by Ubaid Iridu pottery, nothing is available for their identification. Only 2 groups of populations arrived later and in larger number laid historical records, Sumerian and Semitic groups. The Sumerians, who spoke an isolated language not correlated to any linguistic family, are the most ancient group living in the region for which we have historical evidence. They occupied the delta between the 2 rivers on the southern part of the present Iraq, one of the oldest inhabited wetland environments. The Semitic groups were semi-nomadic people who spoke a Semitic language and lived in the northern area of Syro-Arabian desert, breeding small animals. From here, they reached Mesopotamia, where they settled among the pre-existing populations. The Semitic people, more numerous in the north, and the Sumerians, more represented in the south, having absorbed the pre-existing populations, melted their cultures, laying the basis of the Western civilization. And that's in Search of Genetic Footprints of Sumerians, a survey of Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA variation in the marsh Arabs of Iraq. Now, in the study of DNA samples collected from various groups, African haplogroups were also analyzed, and the following are their conclusions. African haplogroups are of Northeast and Sub-Saharan African origins and represent minor components in both groups. The Northeast African contributions is mainly represented by HGM1, which accounts for 2.8% of Marsh Arabs and 1.2% of Iraqi samples. The latter displaying also 0.6% of HGU6. The Sub-Saharan African component comprised of HGS, L0, L1, L2, and L3, and accounted for 4.9% in the marshes and 9.1% of the control sample. Out of the 12 African sub-haplogroups identified in the survey, 6 in the marshes and 7 in the control sample, only one, L2A1, was shared between the two Iraqi groups. You can check that link. I try to get these links over in the chat if possible. So as we go on, we just take a look at here, and there's something that, as when we started doing this research, it was a common feature at a lot of the depictions, or the way that the Sumerians depicted themselves. And in many of these depictions of the people in Mesopotamia appear to have a noticeable trait, but we refer to what we refer today as the monobrow, a feature not commonly found in ancient African iconography. It's a trait that's prevalent throughout the Middle East and in some Indian countries, and is traceable to the PAX3 gene. And this is Ninyish Zida, the son of Gudea of Lagash, and you'll find that in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Now, 23andMe researchers have identified more than 50 genetic variants associated with having the unibrow. 2 of those genetic variants are in or near the PAX3 and EDAR genes, which have also been associated with unibrow growth by other researchers. The PAX3 gene influences the development of pigment-producing skin cells. The EDAR gene plays a big role in our hair growth, along with the development of our sweat glands and teeth. You can refer, of course, to 23andme.com, who did a thing on this. So we'll go right here. This Tajiki, okay, let me, since I'm quoting, Tajikistan is the only Central Asian country where the unibrow reigns supreme, a symbol of feminine beauty and purity. And it's not as if every Tajiki woman has it. The unibrow is the exception, and still found more commonly in places outside the capital. And this is from an article, blog page, where the unibrow reigns in the world, in Impact Lab blog page. Let me go. All right, here's another article. From the conversation, how we discovered the genetic origins of the monobrow and other hair traits, March 1st, 2016. Now, I'm leading up to something by showing you this, because I'm trying to tie in and show you, or at least give you an idea that the ancient Sumerian iconography seems to be closely related to the peoples of the Near East, Iraq, Syria, Iran, etc. All right, so we often don't realize how strongly hair features are stratified across continents. For instance, straight hair is virtually non-existent in sub-Saharan Africa, whereas we only really see variation in hair color in West Eurasia. We identified the gene PAX3 as the monobrow gene. It has previously been shown to control where in the face Nazian is located, the point at the middle of the 2 eyebrows. So it is reasonable to see it associated with the monobrow too, which is hair covering that part, Rare mutations of the PAX3 have been shown to cause Waardenburg syndrome type 1. 85% of patients with this condition have monobrows. Now, you have people who have this Waardenburg disease, you know. Some of them had a tendency to have blue eyes, which is something we're going to go into a little later. From the coming of age in Sumeria, Gilgamesh, and other lives, this New York Times article mentions that Samuel Kramer, he does not believe that the Sumerians who appeared in southern Iraq 5,000 years ago were psychologically very different from today's men and women, or on radically better terms with their gods, as some scholars have supposed. He imagines, rather, that they resembled us. They struggled for their bread or wages. They felt proud. They wrote poems. They grew irritated and too much noise. They got drunk. They wondered anxiously about dying. Samuel, okay, well, I should have, all right. Well, here we go. It's the same thing right here. So here we have, again, right here, Kramer is it right here? Okay. From the evidence of their sculpture, they looked out on the world much as Mr. Kramer does, with large eyes, large wide eyes, prominent eyebrows, and a certain urbanity of expression that may be traceable to something pleasant and intelligent in the set of the mouth. Here we go, the reference to the monobrow. Now, I wanted you to take a look at just some comparisons, and you decide from what you see here. Here we have one of the sons of Gudea, monobrow, and a typical modern Arab. You have Warka in the Iraqi Museum, 3200 BC, monobrow. This Tajikistan girl from a 2020 article, same thing. Here we have Nin Allah, the daughter of the Sumerian king Erbau, and a Tajikistan woman, the monobrow. Here we have Rudolf Hess, the German serial killer, Nazi serial killer, and you have a Anatum of Gesh, who was a ruler there. And of course, we have Sharugi, who we all know as Sargon, depicted with the familiar unibrow as well. And this is also in the Louvre Museum in Paris, France. As you can clearly see, there is some type of link, because we got, just like it was shown earlier, even women along in Pakistan, India, they also have that same unique trait. It's not saying that Africans or Black folk don't have it, or you will never find them at, but it's not prevalent in any of the iconography or drawings or carvings as a prominent feature as we find in Mesopotamian societies. Also here, we have the king of Uruk and Or, Lugal, Kis-Alsi. Same thing, it's right there. So I'm gonna let that settle, and then we're gonna move on, because my point is, again, is to ask the question, were the Sumerians Black? Were the blue eyes symbolic? The evidence would indicate yes. However, it shouldn't be mistaken as racial characteristics. There are several artifacts which dates to the early Bronze period, and here we see an example with the inlay of shell and lapis lazuli set in shale. And unless this is Anatum of Lagash again. And if you notice the lapis, of course, in the eyes and the nipples. And we know that there's no humans or animals with blue nipples. So this has to be some type of symbolic reference. So when you see people say, well, the Sumerians had blue eyes, well, yeah, but it had a deeper meaning as far as they were concerned. So this is not something that just because you see this and this type of stone, because of the color of the stone, doesn't necessarily represent them as the people either. All these things, everything was symbolic. Everything had a reference to it. And of course, again, the unibrow. So the Sumerian term for eye or eyes is igi, and the dark eyeliner was called shembizida, which is the coal that you see a lot of Arabs still wearing today. You can look this up. It's up at the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary. So this statue of Ibe to Nubanda, the overseer, goes back to the 2400 BC, and it's in the Sumerian collection at the Temple of Ishtar in the Louvre Museum. I mean, it's really a nice piece of work, but again, this does not necessarily mean that these were Europeans. I hope I'm not confusing you, but this is how they relied on certain types of stone, and the eyes, again, were all symbolic. So the brilliant blue eyes are largely symbolic, and being that the lapis lazuli was viewed as one of the most precious stones that represented the heavens, skies, at times it was used to decorate the eyes, showing brilliance, shine, and the wearer was usually comparable to the Anuna, or the gods. In the Sumerian epic Enki and Nimcha, we read the following. Enki looked at who turned back the light, the man with constantly opened eyes. If you read this entire text, you'll see various references to the lapis and how it was viewed as being a precious stone that they placed in various places. All right, so here we go. As far as the eyes are concerned, new research showed that people with blue eyes have a single common ancestor. Scientists have tracked down a genetic mutation which took place 6,000 to 10,000 years ago and is the cause of the eye color of all blue-eyed humans alive on the planet today, according to the University of Copenhagen. And you'll find this in Science Daily magazine, January 31st, 2008. In Business Insider, September 21st, 2017, all blue-eyed people have one ancestor in common. Born around 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, blue eyes are caused by a gene mutation. For years, researchers had searched for it on the OCA2 gene. The OCA2 gene determines how much brown pigment is in our eyes, but what they were looking for wasn't there at all. The mutation was found on an entirely different gene called HERC2. HERC2 turns off OCA2, meaning it turns off the brown and reveals the blue. Every blue-eyed person has this exact same mutation. How did this mutation get its start? Possibly when humans migrated from Africa to Europe. Now, this is from Live Science on the same topic. A genetic mutation affecting the OCA2 gene in our chromosomes resulted in the creation of a switch, which literally turned off the ability to produce brown eyes. Eidberg said, the genetic switch is located in the gene adjacent to OCA2, and rather than completely turning off the gene, the switch limits its action, which reduces the production of melanin in the iris. In effect, the turn down switch diluted brown eyes to blue. It's exactly what I sort of expected to see from what we know about selection around this area, said John Hawks of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, referring to the study results regarding the OCA2 gene. People with blue eyes have a single common ancestor, according to new research. Same thing. We still want to do the same thing. Now, DNA analysis showed that skeletons preserved in the caves were genetically distant from people who historically lived in the region. And some of these genetic differences match those of people who lived in neighboring Anatolia and Zagros Mountains, which are now part of Turkey and Iran, the study found. So what's interesting about this is if you look at these citations, you have the blue-eyed immigrants transformed ancient Israel 6,500 years ago by Mindy Weisberger, 2018. And the people known as Gutians were from the Zagros area. And you can find that in the victory stele of Utu Hingao, which we're going to probably touch on as well. So let's keep going. The blue eye mutation. See, lapis lazuli again. The mutation that gave rise to blue eyes altered the OCA2 gene, a gene that codes for the production of brown pigment, melanin, in our eyes. But why are there so many blue-eyed people in Europe? The first thing to consider is that Europe was the epicenter of the blue-eyed gene mutation. This might be one of the most important factors to explain the high proportion of blue eyes on the continent. Black people are affected by this genetic mutation in the same way any other human is. But because the mutation originated in Europe, it is rare to see a Black baby born with blue eyes. We will explore this concept more in the sections below. Another but less common reason why a Black baby is born to be born with blue eyes is if it is blue eyes is if it has ocular albinism or Waardenburg syndrome. Another important hypothesis is partner selection. The gist of this concept is that individuals were much more choosy in ancestral Europe than anywhere else in the world. In other words, a European guy in those days was more attracted to women with blue eyes than those with brown eyes. This type of selection might have increased the likelihood of giving birth to a child with blue eyes and explains the difference in eye color diversity in Europe versus the rest of the world. Both hypotheses explain why the proportion of Black people with blue eyes may be the smallest. And I know a couple of people who have what looks like blue eyes that are Black folk. So it is a rarity, but I just wanted to share this to kind of give people a sense of balance on how this story is coming across. So the lapis. So it's zangi. The zangi or lapis, the term na for zangi 3 is a Sumerian term for what we call lapis lazuli. It was equated with the Akkadian term uknu. The term zajin 3 was used as a name for the color of the stone as well. It could also be used to mean shiny or precious. Lapis lazuli is a beautiful deep blue metamorphic rock that is used as a semi-precious stone. It's also the most frequently attested of the precious stones mentioned in Sumerian textual sources. Most of the items made of lapis that have been recovered from sites are small personal objects such as jewelry and seals. Written Zagin 3, Na, lapis meant shiny, equated with the Akkadian, and so on. The stone was associated with Nisaba, the deity of writing and scribes, the temple of Nisaba, located at Uruk, and called the Ituzajin, the house of the lapis. Tablets of lapis held a special significance. And if you go on, you see that the Mesopotamians may have believed that the tablet was a replica of a sacred star chart. They may have also believed that the heavens were made of lapis lazuli as applied by Car 307 and AO 8196, thus explaining the color of the blue sky above. Several texts refer to Anzagin, or blue heavens, including the incantation of Utu in the hymn of Rinsen. Now, this is in Mesopotamian Cosmic Geography by the Assyriologist Horowitz. So in the text called Temple Hymns, line C4801, we read the following: who appeared in the lapis lazuli colored sky, a celebration, to whom the hero pays homage. The constant reference to the Zagin or the lapis and the hero, or those who are comparable to the gods. So here we go. Sumer and the Sumerians. This is the standard of Ur, which is a very popular wooden chest that was located in the city-state of Ur. Now, let's briefly illustrate how the early Sumerians depicted themselves in artwork, which would help eliminate the fallacious argument that the Sumerians were Black, African, Negro. On the left, because you have the stele of Ushimal, the Papshes priest Shahar, and his daughter. And this is dynastic period, circa 1 through 2. And this is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Here we have an example of how the early Sumerians depicted themselves, and this can be found in the British Museum, exhibit number 086260, and referred to as the Blau monuments. And it's dated back to the 3100 BC period. As you can see here, those in aristocracy always depicted themselves as being bald, or usually depicted themselves as being bald. Yeah, this is even before they were wearing the caucasus. And here's another illustration. We'll get more in detail shortly. And this is Proto-Sumerian. Here we see on the plaque Ur-Nanshi, the ruler of Lagash, early dynastic 3, and he's depicted bald. There he is. He's depicted bald and only wearing the kaunikis, this big piece of fleece skirt that is descendant, with all of his descendants going all the way back to Inmetina. And this also is in the Louvre Museum in Paris. So you get a good picture of it. You see the officials here. Another great place to get a sense of how the Sumerians depicted themselves would be to view the royal standard of Ur, which dates to the period prior to the likely appearance in the region of Semitic-speaking peoples. It shows noblemen, slaves, average Sumerian workers, soldiers, and women, 2600, 2400 BCE. We don't find the term Sangha, black-headed people, being attested to at all in the 3rd millennium. We do know of it in the Old Babylonian literary texts, and of course the royal inscriptions from the 2nd and 1st millennium. Now, it does occur in the Shulgi hymn, so it may be related to this presumed period of literary and religious reform during the Ur III and Ensin-Larsa period. The 3rd dynasty of Ur, also called the Neo-Sumerian period or Neo-Sumerian Empire, refers to the 22nd and 21st century BC Middle Chronology, Sumerian ruling dynasty based in the city of Ur, and a short-lived territorial political state. Okay. Now, in the Louvre Museum is the Stele of Vultures, a monument from the early dynastic 3 period, celebrating a victory of King Anatun of Lagash over its neighboring city-state Amma, ruled by the Sumerian king Ush. It illustrates various battles and religious scenes and named after the vultures that can be seen in one of the scenes. Let's see if I can find it. I can't see it up in here. So this one is of significance, and you're going to see it as we go along here. And of course, we look at this depiction by Sumerians of their own. Enannatum, first, the ruler of Lagash. The Sumerian war deity Ningersu is seen holding a net full of prisoners as he clubs them from trying to escape. This iconography is of importance because this depiction of the Sumerian war deity is clearly not Negro, African, Black. Neither are the Sumerian captives of Umma under Lugal Ush, right here. This guy's trying to escape, and Ningersu hits him right there, and here are a bunch of little guys. Here's a bigger picture. See the hook nose? Look at that. In another scene, we see the king of Lagash, right here, Enannatum, riding a war chariot. Neither the war god, soldiers, nor Enannatum are depicted as Negro, African, or Black. Enannatum leading a heavily armed flocks of soldiers, trampling slain enemies underneath, right here. These are the slain armies of the soldiers in the flax position. And that's the war god Enannatum. But if you notice, none of these people seem to resemble Africans. And by the way, this is not in some late period in Sumer. In addition, an additional piece of evidence can be found on the victory stele of Sargon, king of Akkad. Here we have Sargon, and this is his victory stele. Sargon victory stele SB3. Sargon lived in the mid-24th century BC. He seized the throne of Ur-Zababa, the king of Kish, and went on and conquered all of Akkad. He conquered Sumer in 2350 BC, and later conquered the rest of Mesopotamia, thus creating one of the first empires in history. Take a good look at this here, because this is going to be of some significance. This is Sargon's victory stele. This is SB3. All right. Now, what's interesting about Sargon's victory stele SB2, we see Sargon with a set of captives, some of which were loyalists to the Sumerian ruler of the time, Lugal Zagisi. We read, this hairstyle is comparable with that of Sumerian soldiers carrying pieces of booty on the lower register of the standard of Or, thus confirming South Mesopotamian province of the prisoners in the net. Then you'll find this on the two steles of Sargon, iconology and visual propaganda at the beginning of Royal Akkadian relief. This is from Lorenzo Necro. Now, this is very similar to the previous stele that we saw early on. Now, look at that. Here we go here. But look, if you can, I don't know if it can, well, we're going to see it a little closer, but if you look here, it's hair on top, but it balled around the back and sides. And that's referred to as kishi. And it refers to the Akkadian practice of shaving half the head as punishment or a sign of bondage, forelock, half, and to do in Akkadian. This is from the the standard of Or, and this is Sargon's victory stele, number 2. See the similarity. So to confirm that, I went to the concise dictionary of Akkadian by the eminent scholar Jeremy Black and Andrew, and of course, Nicholas Postgate on page 96. And they indicate how gulubu, to shear or shave, mutata, to shave half the head as punishment, as a sign of slavery. So this makes you go back and say, so this is Sargon's stele while he was in battle when he was taking over the Sumerian city and then all of Mesopotamia. And the people that he captured, we don't see Black people. Why is that? These individuals are likely the Akkadian prisoners due to the slight difference in the hairstyles on the standard of Or versus Sargon's victory stele SB3, which the hair goes all the way down the back of the head, but the heads of the prisoners in the net SB2 upper right are shaved in the back, again confirming the southern Mesopotamian province. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Look at that. This is Anatun's vulture stele and Sargon's victory stele. Here are the captive enemies on the victory stele. And here they are. These are Sumerians. The long-haired man here is recognized as Lugal-Zagisi, the king and leader of the Sumerian army. Now, Lugal-Zagisi was captured by Sargon after the battle. Here we go. Just like Unanatuns. Look at that. All right. So in an old Babylonian copy from Nippur, the inscription of Sargon, king of Akkad, overseer of Inanna, king of Kish, anointed of Anu, king of the land, governor of Enlil. He defeated the city of Uruk and tore down its walls. In the battle of Uruk, he won, took Lugal-Zagisi, king of Uruk, in the course of the battle and led him in a collar to the gate of Enlil. And this here we have from the wonderful, this is a heavy book, very powerful book called The Art of the First Cities. And then here we have another depiction here of early Sumerians. Just don't bear that. There's nothing in here that anyone can really equate as being Black and or African. Now, in an online dialogue with John Halloran and the Assyriologist Dr. Nicholas Postgate, University of Cambridge, regarding the term Sumer, Ki-in-Year, a key point Halloran makes is the need for the proper meaning of the term Sangiga. Sangiga. It's like the it's an interesting way to pronounce the. You don't have like sag like you would see it spelled. It makes the like the ing is a throat. Sangiga, meaning blackheads. Halloran, did you write in your book Early Mesopotamia Society and Economy at the Dawn of History that Ki-in-Year, the Ki-in-Gi, means land of the Sumerian tongue? If so, is that because you think that Eme, tongue, language, became N, dignitary, lord, ancestor, statue, high priest, through vocal assimilation? Now, Postgate responds, admittedly, Sumerologists haven't gone much for consonantal assimilation, but going from Emingir to Emigir doesn't seem too far-fetched, and it explains why it has R as a final consonant. But this is more dealing with linguistics, so I'm not going to go too far, but I'm just going to get down to the main point. So it seems possible, it turns, and this is Halloran, it seems possible, it turns out that there are not many instances of Ki-in-gira that can be interpreted as a freestanding genitival syntactum. I only find a couple in the victory of Utu Hingal and the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature. So the paucity of these instances favor your interpretation. I had just never heard it or thought about it until this week. If you look at my published lexicons suggesting the reinterpretation of Sangiga as having originally meant native person instead of its literal meaning of black-headed, you will see that I am open to consonantal assimilation, gradually changing words which were then reinterpreted in popular understanding and writing. Of course, Postgate responds with, well, in fact, I think even both those instances can be taken as locatives, as suggested by B prefix in line 2. And that's going into the electronic text corpus. So by all means, do by all means cite me. I'm happy with it. So the point in that was that because a few early Assyriologists had used the literal interpretation or the literal translation of the term blackhead, as in blackheads, but that's where the problem came in. And that was part of the Sumerian problem, because black didn't necessarily mean black as in the black people, because you had other darker skinned people. So black didn't necessarily automatically render one person to be African as opposed to being Dravidian or Tamil. So the old interpretations of Sumerians are outdated. Blackheads as a term has no supporting evidence as a racial epithet. Therefore, it's illogical to conclude, based on interpretation, that the Sumerians would single out their heads as only black rather than a more substantive term for the entire body or person being black. Yet, black as a term to denote race was foreign in the Bronze Age. Even if it did mean a black-skinned person, wouldn't necessarily mean a sub-Saharan African. In a book called History and Black African Americans in Search of an Ancient Past, Yaakov Shavitz states, we do not know whether the term blackhead is meant as a realistic or figurative description. Logic suggests that if the reference was to blacks in the African sense, black-bodied or a similar phrase would have been more opposite than the ultra-specific black heads. Moreover, we have already seen that the color black in antiquity usually denoted character traits or age. Any physiognomic similarities between Sumerians and Black Africans would hardly have been all-inclusive. Moreover, nowhere in the entire corpus of Afrocentric historical scholarship or in its much quoted sources is there any evidence of cultural similitude. And you can get this book, it's on page 222 and from 2001. Now, we're going into another area which gets into a little more controversial. I hope I don't offend anyone with where we're going with this one. That woolly hat. It's been suggested that the sheep's wool headdress on Gudea and others represented an afro. I listened to an author who is an advocate of the Sumerians being black, stating that the headpiece that you see Gudea wearing is representing, certainly he could have worn an afro himself, or they themselves, but for some reason the hat was the dead giveaway, which doesn't really hold any weight. On many of the statues of Gudea, he wears a headdress which some have made the ridiculous charge that it represented or imitated kinky hair, an afro. This is false. Although Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian kings wore crowns, these crowns were not always alike. Gudea's crown was distinctive to Lagash. It has a straight sided brim and with stylized curls of lamb's wool, unlike the crowns of Hammurabi and Ornama, which were smooth without the curls. See? Here's another statue depicting Gudea of Lagash. And this is his son, or Ningirshu. Now, someone today can realize, hey, well, you know, the Bible talks about Jesus having hair like lamb's wool, blah, 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 blah. You know, those arguments are interesting, but in this case, a hat that's supposed to represent an afro, again, doesn't really hold any weight. And it's kind of, you know, it's an insult to a person's intelligence to come up with a conclusion like that, in my opinion. Gudea's choice to emphasize his headgear's sheep's wool was deliberate. It not only complemented his meek, iconic, humble standing and sitting position, it also offered a distinct kind of allure designed to make Gudea powerfully attractive to both his people and his humility to his god, Ningishzida. Here's another statue of Gudea. The fundamental problem with those arguments is inconsistency. They'll say that under Gudea was the Renaissance period where you find blue-eyed statues, etc. Yet this same Gudea, after the Gutian occupation, reconstructed temples, built new ones, erected numerous statues and sculptures of the very images claimed to be white Sumerians. Yet he has a hat supposedly representing an afro. This would have been more convincing for Gudea to simply wear an actual afro rather than wear a woolly hat, if he is promoting his Black Africanness. Take a look at it. Now, again, in the book, The Lives of Sumerian Sculpture and Archaeology of the Early Dynastic Temples, it is only in modern scholarship that a Sumerian people were designated according to definitions of race and ethnicity. Let me say that again. It is only in modern scholarship that a Sumerian people were designated according to definitions of race and ethnicity. In 1939, philologist Falkland Jacobson wrote an important article reviewing the evidence for a Sumerian-Semitic conflict in the 3rd millennium BC text. Dismissing notions of a racially construed warfare, he concluded that ancient conflicts instead were based on political and territorial factors, not race. He says, there was a virtual unanimity about what had shaped early Mesopotamian history. It was race. Sumerians fighting Semites. Races differed in the physically, and the character. So cranial measurements, shapes of noses, and even bearded or beardless were matters of the moment. It was not until 1937 or 38 that in Chicago I found, rather to my surprise, that there was no such evidence, and so presumably no such racial conflict. And of course, we go to the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian dictionary, just various terms in regards to blackness, yish, mesh, written Yamesh, blackness, black spot, black wood, mesh, Akkadian, shumu, sangya, humankind, sangiga, humankind, human, year, native, native local, sanginga, blackheads. And you have, here we have it expanded, black. But if you notice, we have black here, black that, black this. But when it gets down to sangiga, we have it as humankind, or a reference to a local, a native, someone indigenous. Now, the word sikipa, which is hair. Some have speculated that the term sangiga, blackhead, was in reference to the hair on the head, an old and disregarded assumption. It's misleading because hair on the head would be sikipa, as we read below. Spare you the transliteration. So, O Father Enlil, the fate that you have decreed cannot be explained. As for my hairstyle of lordship and the diadem with which I was crowned. So here we have the hairstyle. Of course, we right up here at 458, line 458, sikipa. Sikipa. So whenever someone says that, well, the black head, that was talking about the head, their hair, the hair that was on their head. But we have a specific term in reference to the hair. And we find that textually to support it. And this here is from the standard of or in the peace scene. Okay. So here we have another term that comes from the Akkadian. You have zamat kakadi. The expression zamat kakadi is a poetic term referring to mankind as a totality, created by the gods and kept in safe pastures by the kings. The literal meaning likewise poses a problem because the reference to black hair is without any parallel in Akkadian. This is the Assyrian Dictionary of the Oriental Institute, Chicago, page 76. Zamakakadi, blackhead, represented humanity or meant humanity. The SUC made the sound with the TS sound z, like z, like a z, zamak. In Akkadian, the term used when referring to native Mesopotamians. The Sumerian equivalent, of course, is sangig. The cuneiform sign, which looks like a little N, is pronounced as in singing. Say that. So when you see the English word, which somebody would say sagia, it is sang, and that was a very distinct way of pronunciation, sangiga. The general term for people or humans is sangiga. Sangiga. In the following slide, you'll see that the term sangiga has been corrected and replaced with the proper, sensible, and more plausible term for accuracy. On the interpretation, one interpretation has it as Zamat Kakadi relates to head plus darkness, i.e. mind, cluelessness, not blackness as color, just as the Akkadian of the Sumerian word utu, sunrise, relates to sun, lightness, not whiteness as a color. Even modern Sumerian dictionaries strayed away from this black-haired notion and offered meanings such as humankind. Fortunately, the word sangig appeared in an important paragraph in Hammurabi's prologue in the stele. So this is from the digital corpus of cuneiform lexical text. And up here in 18, you'll see Sangigiga, Zamat, right here, Zamat Kakadi, humankind. The same word. These are the same word, the same meaning. Zamat Kakadi, the expression is poetic. You know, I think this is a repeat of what I had earlier. Oh, okay. Oh, I went back up, sorry. Okay. So this is from the Assyrian Dictionary of the Oriental Institute of Chicago, University of Chicago. This is one of the largest volumes on Mesopotamian history, language, and culture. And right here, you have it. Oh, that's what it said. So right here, on the Salmu, black, Zamat Kakadi, black on the head, a figurative expression for mankind. Kima, Shamash, Ana, Zamat Kakadi, Wasima, rising like Shamash over mankind. There it is. And here we have a transliteration from the Code of Hammurabi prologue. And it was, how did it go? It's right here. It was then that Anu and Enlil ordained Hammurabi, a devout prince who fears the gods, to demonstrate justice within the land, to destroy evil and wickedness, to stop the mighty exploiting the weak, to rise like Shamash over the mass of humanity, illuminating the land. Anu and Enlil ordained me to improve the welfare of my people. This is from the prologue of the Code of Hammurabi, paragraph 3, lines 27 through 49. When it came to hair, Sumerian aristocracy usually depicted themselves bald, and any notions that this term meant black hair becomes problematic, lacking any textual support. Sang, head. Head has several definitions. The term represented a head, but not exclusively a person's head. Also, one considered to be the first and or in charge. And you can find more on that at the electronic text, the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary. And I'm just showing you here, we have the Sumerians with the shaved heads. The Sumerians shaved their heads and their faces, while the Akkadians wore long hair and full beards and mustaches. Hence the phrase black-headed ones originated in this period as a description of the Akkadians in contrast to the Sumerians. Semitic kings say that the gods have given them sovereignty over the black-headed ones. Sumerian attire, gunaku, consisted of a thick woolen petticoat fastened around the waist with a girdle. This is a biblical word from Harper's, page 290. And on the right, you see the Sumerian banquet scene going back to the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. So I put that there, man. I found this depiction of an Akkadian, as best I could make it out, in the way that they were dressed is radically different than the way that the ancient Sumerians had been depicted. There was a series of skirts, sometimes one above the other in horizontal flounces. Sometimes it was perfectly plain, at other times it was scalloped around the bottom. The Akkadian dress, on the other hand, consisted of a loincloth over which was worn a long, narrow strip of cloth wrapped around the body in spiral folds and thrown over the left shoulder. This is from Biblical World, volume 45, edited by William Ranley Harper. And on the right is the Akkadian King Narumsen, and this is in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. So I tried to touch bases with various Assyriologists who, these people are really accessible. You know, it'll take a little while before they'll return the call or send a text message or email. With this one, let me see if I can pull something up real quick. With this particular one, he kind of gave me some pointers. This is from the Sumerian linguist, author, and scholar Lorenzo Verderem of Sapienza University, Rome, Italy. And he states that, "Dear Chuck, if I may, the Sumerian reading is confirmed by the Akkadian translation of the term Zamak Kakadi, blackheaded, was the term used by the Sumerians to call themselves. We know nothing about the origins of the Sumerians that probably arrived late 4th millennium in Mesopotamia. But from where? At this point, it's correct to say that there are dozens of hypotheses. However, none could be proven. It is correct to say that we know few of the physical anthropology, or if you prefer, the race of the Sumerians, because no analysis on the skeletal remains have been done systematically. And the reason for this lack of DNA verification is unfortunately due to the chemical composition of Mesopotamian soil that does not permit to preserve ancient DNA, as illustrated in the book here to the left, which in the English title is Mesopotamia Ancient Archaeology and Myth-Making through Myth-Making Thought in the Land of Sumer and Akkad. Someone was able to give me some pages from that, and I looked at the English translations of it. And in the Studies of Historical Anthropology, Volume 4 in 2004 through 2006, Department of Historical Anthropology, Institute of Archaeology, Warsaw University, Poland, on page 151, the followers of new archaeology aimed at the reconstruction of interactions between human populations and their environments. This new paradigm and research on human remains was much more underlined than in the discussion on the Sumerian race. Also, because the general poor state of preservation of bones in Mesopotamia, the scarcity of well-preserved skulls, which were suitable for racial speculation, made the physical anthropology only a supplement for linguistic and archaeological data in ethnogenetical speculation. I'll leave you with that. And here's the Sumerian scene milking cows, making dairy products in the facade of the temple of Nin-Hersach at the temple of Al-Alubat. And this is in the Iraqi Museum. Familiar cast of characters. What's particularly interesting about the Ubaids, well, I'm not going to read that because that was just in case, that was something I put up there just in case it came up. The only prospect for an ethnic component in Assyria, an Assyrian identity, is their use of the ancient Sumerian designation, the blackheaded people. It is now clear, however, that this was probably not an ethnic term, but a general reference to the Mesopotamian people. This is in Ethnicity and Identity in Ancient Israel, page 37. As indicated moments ago, the longest running debate in the fields of Assyriology is the Sumerian problem. The question centers around, were the first inhabitants of Mesopotamia Semites or Indo-Europeans? What follows is a chronicle of academic discourses that often degenerates into vicious personal attacks. One book purports to answer the Sumerian question with claims that the Sumerian question has been solved. opening the door to an additional argument, but with a Black twist. That publication is Black Sumer, The Ancient Origins of Civilization by Hermann Herrnstein. Went too far. Here we go. All right. In what's a very noticeable contradiction and or bold deception before even opening the book is its cover. The author claims a Black African Sumer, simultaneously presenting a non-Black Neo-Sumerian statue of Gudea of Lagash, reigning after Sargon of Akkad and the Gutian empires. This was not easy to find. So, there you have it. This is Gudea in the Louvre Museum. This is not an African. Here's another depiction of Gudea, same period. Herrnstein could have used any of the 70 or more images of Gudea statues that illustrated more clarity and detail of his facial features. But for some reason, he chose an image with heavy nose and lip damage, appealing to the conspiracy theory that some hold of statues with nose damage was the result of destroying Black features, of which zero evidence is in Gudea's case. What do you think? Look at that. Still have the familiar Pax gene. And here's the Neo-Sumerian bust of Gudea. Side, rear. And you find this at the Louvre under A03182. I'm sorry, A03182. If not rigorously fact-checked, the reader could have concluded that the image on the cover of his book was of some African presence in Sumer, but it's not. It's from the Lagash dynastic period. Both statues are of Gudea, same period, same location, Lagash. The left statue didn't make the cover. The right statue didn't make it, right here. This, remember the afro? What's with this one then? And this also kind of gives you an idea that because of the stones that may have been used in the various statues, didn't necessarily identify them racially or what color they were. They use it for various reasons. Here it is again in the Louvre Museum. This is Gudea, same guy that's on the cover. Same guy. I'll leave that. Isi Uji, I had to call it the Nigerian embassy, Isi Uji versus Sangiga. These are Mesopotamian depictions, Sumerian period. These are statues during the Igbo period. These are Igbo statues. Although there exists no depictions of the ancient Sumerians as black-headed people, this fact didn't prevent some from attempts at painting the Sumerians as African, Negro, Black, based on that term. As we read in the Black Sumer book, you'll notice several inconsistencies, skewed, or misleading information. These are Igbo. Herrnstein cites K. Williams's book, Dictionary of Onitsha Igbo, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Upon investigation, his source, although the term Isi, meaning head or chief, is used, and Uji is defined as black, is not a term used in the context Herrnstein describes in his book. In fact, in his book, he has brackets which are inserted in the quote, an indication that it's not part of the definition, but Hermstein's interpretation. We're almost finished. So here we have Black Sumer here, and the dictionary of the Igbo language. So what I was just pointing out, it's a minor issue, nothing heavy, but when we go to it and we see where it says Africa, so the Africans, black race, Indi Isi Uji, where here he has literally black-headed or blackhead country, but that's not in the dictionary. It's just something minor, but it is something that could misdirect the reader had they not done a comparative example. I did a comparison of both. Hermstein's assertions that the Sumerians in their language uses the Igbo term for blackheads as a racial epithet to describe themselves. I have never found where the Igbo had a universally accepted term blackheads in the definition of Igbo. It's an imaginary argument that the Sumerians were originally Igbo and that these Sumerians retained this name Nsangiga from Isi Uji. Isi Uji, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's what the guy at the embassy told me. Okay, so as with the dictionary of Unchi Igbo, the Igbo English dictionary demonstrates how black-headed is properly applied and understood. The overall point is the definition of black as a racial identity came post 14th century. Therefore, the Sumerians could not have used it as a description of a black people. There you have it. Because also in that dictionary, in the dictionary here, it says that it demonstrates how head is also used to denote one in authority and leadership. See? Right here, chief, herdsman, Indi Isi, hair on the head, chief, champion, leader, Onyi Isi, Uchi Ichi, head of state. Just something for you to consider in your research. From reading Williams's Igbo dictionary, head had a variety of meanings, leadership, not consistently as a physical head. You will not find blackhead as a racial identity for the Sumerians. Keep in mind that the use of the term black as applied to an ethnic or racial group didn't exist until the 14th century, lasting from January 1st, 1301 to December 31st, 1400, according to the online etymology dictionary, and would have become part of the Igbo language as a racial term until after the 14th century. Therefore, how could the ancient Igbo and Sumerians use such a term to describe themselves as such when the term hadn't developed yet? It's something to think about. Just use common sense on that. As an example, Hermstein takes the position that Emenyir, Sumerian language, and Proto-Bantu are directly related using a linguistic comparative method, which in linguistics, the comparative method is a technique for studying the development of languages by performing a feature by feature comparison of two or more languages with common descent from a shared ancestor, and the extrapolating backwards to infer the properties of that ancestor. That's in the theoretical basis of Indo-European linguistics, Wilfred Lehman. The linguistic argument from Hermstein's are speculative, cherry-picking words from a language and attempting to propose cognates, particularly with Sumerian, is not recognized by linguists as a proper methodology. This approach seems to be a common rabbit hole for confirmation bias. If the method were valid, one would presume that Tamil, Arabic, Turkish, Basque, and, and Hungarian must all be very closely related languages. Obviously, they're not. Therefore, it's a bogus proposal. Nevertheless, some language enthusiasts have used this method and found cognate in the above with Eminyer. Leading scholars on the topic have formed the consensus that there's not enough evidence to establish the Sumerian language as being directly related to any other language and thus maintain Sumerian as a language isolate. This is the Sumerian problem. The Sumerian problem as a topic has been addressed at length by multiple generations of Assyriologists. These Assyriologists have formed a consensus and established a curriculum of ancient Near East studies, which offers us a seemingly endless sea of information to learn from. This is from the Sumerian problem on January 1969. The history of the Sumerian problem clearly shows that the case of this ethnic linguistic group is particularly complicated, and perhaps the question is not only impossible to answer, but simply wrongly addressed. Studies in Historical Anthropology, Volume 4, 2004, Department of Historical Anthropology, Institute of Archaeology, Warsaw University, Poland. Many extremely brilliant people have spent their entire academic careers debating over these topics. In many experiences, if someone who doesn't have a degree in Assyriology, there's discontent with the information provided to them from specialists within the field, and they go through searching for answers from outside of the curriculum of the Near East, of the Near East studies community, cherry-picking various words. Hermstein may have had good intentions. However, it appears that he was just looking for anything he could to validate his own confirmation bias. Cherry-picking terms or words from one language to another, using it as the basis for a linguistic argument to suggest that the targeted languages are cognate isn't difficult to do, nor is it a scientific method, which is why the Mesopotamian linguistic Assyriologists don't recognize it as valid. Here's an example. Rajan Menon, using the cherry-picking method, concluded that Tamil is cognate with Sumerian. By using the same comparative method, Rajan went a step further than Hermstein by using whole lines from the Sumerian literature to further his argument via the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature. Here's an example. Not mentioning that there have been loan words, but I'll give you a second to take a look at that. Here you have the Tamil, you have the Sumerian, and of course you have the English translation. Just showing you that it can be done. You just look for the proper words that you feel is applicable, you'll find plenty of words. Likewise, with Proto-Japonic and Sumerian. This was said to me, and it was very interesting. If you look at this, you see new, or see the word new in Proto-Japonic, and the Sumerian new in the same thing. No, not T, Nam T, life, Ma, rain, M, rain, Pa, leaf, Ha, leaf, Kitan, Proto-Mongolic, Gore, state, Core, country, mountains. You have Usu, you have U, grain, both meaning grain. So if applying the cherry-picking comparative method with early Japanese, Japonic, Mongolic, or other Asian languages with Sumerian, one could assume that the ancient Japanese were Sumerian. In the book Sumerian Grammar by Etzar, on the hopeless question of linguistic affiliation with Sumerian, Assyriologists and Sumerian grammar specialists, Edzard, Det Otto Edzard states the following: Sumerian may be compared to such languages as Georgian, Basque, or Edelman, and many others. Such comparison is, however, purely structural and of no consequence for the question of the linguistic affiliation of Sumerian. Scholars have wasted much effort looking for living cognates of ancient Sumerian, not realizing that the problem is practically unsolvable for the following reasons. Sumerian must have separated from a hypothetical language family of which it part in the middle or late 4th millennium BC at the latest. We know next to nothing about the sound and the structure of Sumerian before the middle of the 3rd millennium. Thus, there is a gap of at least 2,000 years between the time and the oldest reconstructible form of any of the languages which have been compared to Sumerian, e.g. Turkish, Hungarian, Sino-Tibetan. Efforts to find cognates have been exclusively based on the sound of individual words. Yet, according to W. Dieters, 1963-76, page 76, who discussed the problem of Basque Caucasian affinities, any words in language A and B that sound alike today are more likely to be unrelated than related, because they are the product of phonic evolution over several millennia, not to mention the possible diachronical change in meaning. While according to Dieters, if counter-interpretive language X were really a descendant from the language Y related to Proto-Sumerian more than 5 or 6 millennia ago, the sound structure and vocabulary of that hypothetical language Y are liable to have become altered beyond recognition. This is on page 2 through 3 of excerpts Sumerian grammar. So let's go wrap this up. We're coming down to the Gutians. The Gutians were an invading group who occupied Mesopotamia. Were not viewed as favorable according to the stele of Utu-Hingao by the envoys of Utu-Hingao, Terigan, and his wife and children in Dabrum were captured. They placed fetters on the hands and put a cloth blindfold over his eyes. Utu-Hingao, before Utu made him lie on his Utu's feet and on his neck, he set his foot. He said, wait a minute, it's good. Utu-Hingao, before Utu made him lie at his Utu's feet and on his neck, he set his foot. Gutium, the fanged snake of the mountain ranges, he made drink from the cracks of the earth. This is in the Victory Stele of Utu-Hingao, transliteration and translation by Daniel A. Foxbog. So here we have the Gutians, people who do not know permanent settlement with human feelings, way of thinking, but with the instincts of a dog, body shaped like that of a monkey. Enlil sent them from the mountain like locusts. They are covering the entire land. This is in Kings, Gods, and People Establishing Monarchy in the Ancient World. Page 78. The Gutian period was from 2199 to 2119 BC, succeeding the Akkadian Empire. The Gutians as a people appeared first in mid-3rd millennium sources from Babylon under the Akkad dynasty. They are depicted as raiders who disrupted agricultural life. And this is in Encyclopedia Ironica. Textual sources suggest that the Gutian administration showed little concern for maintaining agriculture, written records, or public safety. They reportedly released all farm animals to roam about Mesopotamia freely, and soon brought about famine and rocketing grain prices. The decline coincided with severe drought, possibly connecting with the climatic changes reaching across the era from Kemet to Greece. They were regarded as the massive horde that destroyed the Akkadian Empire. Now, the Sumerian ruler Utu-Hengal, the king of Uruk, throws out the Gutians, and they retreat back to the Zagros Mountains, which is now part of Turkey and Iran. And finally, Ornamu, ruler of the Ur dynasty, cleared the Gutians from Mesopotamia during his reign, bringing about the Renaissance, under which Gudea pioneered a whole new line of monumental building and just changing the whole landscape. Okay, and in conclusion, were the Sumerians black? Were the Sumerians black people? Based on the available evidence, the answer is no. There are a few references to the term Sangiga or Sangig, blackhead, in Sumerian literature. There are no textual, archaeological, nor iconography which would support the hypothesis of the ancient Sumerians being or using a racial epithet to describe themselves. It's illogical to believe that the Sumerians would single out just the head, a black head, and not the whole body being black. It's intellectually dishonest to take a modern racial epithet and apply it to an ancient people as if they used it for themselves. It was simply a poor interpretation from past scholars. Unfortunately, some have and will continue to use those weak arguments that the Sumerians were black. But fortunately, with today's Sumerologists and Assyriologists, corrections are being made to bring about accuracy regarding the use of this and other terms. So that's it for me. Garfield, I appreciate you, and I'm gonna turn this back over to you. And see where we go from here.
Stop right there. Oh man, you just turned the whole community upside down. Listen, man, I'm gonna turn off the internet quick. I don't want nobody to trap my IP address and know where I'm at. You are now a wanted man in this community, brother. And we're not going to keep this going. But I just want to say I thank you and I applaud you for doing what you're doing, bro. I got to go. I'm getting out of here, family. Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. But, hey, I love the smoke. That's what I've been built on. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
I think that Hermelstein information is, you see, one thing why I will never be the most popular guy or the most loved guy in this community, because I'm always contrarian.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't trust none of these old scholars, new scholars. I don't trust none of them, bro. I got to see for myself.
Right.
And, we're too in love with different cultures and we want everybody to be African when technically nobody's an African, because that's a new thing. And two, it's just these scholars that we throw out, they got old information that's way outdated, and we like, if we speak against their information, we are wrong. Hermelstein, I don't know. That guy to me is just a funny guy. I just think of his, but I'm gonna leave it there, man.
I'm not disparaging him, the person. I'm just going by, what the evidence shows, and it is what it is.
All right, cool. All right, I'm gonna leave it there, man, and we're just gonna call it a day. All right.
Okay.
We're gonna leave it there, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you. Tomorrow is Pastor Bennett, and you see that's the issue. Why don't you invite? I can't invite everybody, bro. I can't. I'm not that dude. I can't invite everybody. And by the way, too, we don't need to invite him to defend his work, because the work we are talking about is actually not Hermstein's work. It's the person who actually translated it. That's the show people are not watching. We never said nothing against Hermstein. We said what the original translators put out there. So Hermstein is not even at the issue at the point. The point is he added on to the definitions, which he shouldn't have. And we pointed that out. That's all. We showed what the original said, which is what people need to go back to the root instead of trying to look at different people's interpretations. All right. So Chuck Morgan, peace and love to you, brother.
I appreciate you, brother.
May the planet risk. And
hey, now that's if I'm not going to try to take the show with anything more than that, but I have some unfinished business that I have to take care of regarding that group, but I'll leave that to another issue.
Yeah, definitely. And let me tell you something. Where you're in Hawaii, I'm gonna fly out to Hawaii and I'm gonna meet up in person because I have a plan I want to discuss with you in person.
Oh, sounds good. I'm with it.
We need to get a movie together to deal with this whole Nawapian thing and just get it right out. But anyway, family, peace and love to y'all.
All right.
And I thank you guys for listening. Much power, much respect. Thank you, my brother.
I appreciate you.
Hold on, Chuck. Don't move. Thank you, family, and peace and love.